Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F Podcast, Faith and Family First, where Jim and I are going to talk about the legislative process in a way that's going to keep you interested. So don't be going, oh no, they're going to talk legislative process again and turn off. No, 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 no. Stay tuned because Jim and I are going to give you some inside baseball on some of the ways the legislature will pass bills and why it's so important to fight for an issue sometimes before it becomes law. Let's chat about that. Jim, we know that your time is actually ticking away. Normally in our show, when we're talking about stuff, you'll always talk about how I'm moving, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. And I know that if we had a time capsule right now, we'd see time tick, 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 tick before you actually get on a plane and move away from the beautiful state of Hawaii forever and ever. Amen. But what
No, we'll come back for funerals and stuff.
Okay. Well, I think that what I want to do today is I want our viewers and listeners to kind of get the veil torn a little bit about legislative process, because one of the things that has been coming up, especially this legislative session, are what I call expansion bills. And so what happens is, like, last year when we fought SB1, which was the abortion expansion bill, that bill was a monster bill because it added all kinds of stuff in there. Abortion was legalized in Hawaii in 1970. And I think sometimes people think that once a bill passes or once a bill becomes law, that, it's over, but it's never over, right? And so what I want to talk about today is the way that the legislature sometimes chips away at bad laws and why we sometimes don't have a positive outcome when we try to fight these expansion bills. So let's chat about that a little bit, peel that away so people understand process.
Sure.
Okay, so let's use the abortion bill last year as an example. So we tried very, very hard to stop that bill, not only because it was expanding abortion, they were codifying 14 and 15-year-olds who would now be able to access abortion without parental consent, but that was already happening in Hawaii. So because of Roe versus Wade and the overturn, our legislators decided they wanted to protect abortionists at all costs, right? And so they wrote all these protections in the bill, right? To make sure that if somebody comes to Hawaii and they have an abortion and they have problems with that abortion, they have medical issues or whatever, when they go back to their state, they are not allowed to sue their doctor. They're not allowed to ask for information because our legislature has said that that's all protected stuff now. They won't be able to share it. But it doesn't mean that the issue of abortion is over in Hawaii, does it?
What I would say to start with is the point about last year's bill. It included that 14 and 15-year-olds were being added to the 16 and 17 getting medical care without parental consent. And that's the key to last year's, because if you're not 18 years old in the state of Hawaii, you lack legal capacity to enter into any kind of contract unless you're an emancipated minor. So that's why if you want to buy a car, if you want to rent an apartment, you have to have your parent sign for you. What they did in Hawaii is say that 16 and 17-year-olds, and this was before last year,
right?
16 and 17-year-olds had legal capacity to contract with a healthcare provider for reproductive medical care. And it expressly said does not include abortion services.
That's what the law said prior. The abortion law said
correct.
Prior.
So the fact that was most troubling when it first came out wasn't the abortion part, because it wasn't supposed to include abortion. The troubling part was contraceptives, IUDs, I don't know, condoms, whatever else they were getting, pap smears, at less than 18 years old, meaning they were minors at 16 and 17, their parents didn't have to consent for them. The parents didn't have to know, right? That was the big deal up till last year. Last year, they threw in 14 and 15s with the 16s and 17s from before, and also took out the it doesn't apply to abortion services.
Right. Well, and I think that's what I want people to understand is that when we, changing the issue, when we were fighting assisted suicide, one of the reasons we fought so hard is because we didn't have an assisted suicide law on the books. So this was going to be a brand new law in the state of Hawaii. And so,
And if we could keep it out, we wouldn't have it.
and that's what we did with gambling. We've been able to keep gambling out of the state of Hawaii. And our previous governor, Linda Lingle, she testified a couple of weeks ago on the marijuana bill. And she actually talked about the reason that Hawaii has not passed on a gambling bill here. And we're one of only 2 states that have no form of legalized gambling. The other one is Utah. She talked about the reason that is because even though our legislators might be looking toward gambling as a potential income, they realize that Hawaii has a unique system here where our morals, our values are so different than the rest of the country, the rest of the nation. And we want to keep Hawaii, Hawaii. I mean, that's been a motto since I was in high school. Let's keep Hawaii, Hawaii, right? We don't necessarily want to look like the other states. Now, you and I both know, though, legislatively, our legislators will pick and choose, right? If they want the bill, then they want to look like the mainland. If they don't want the bill, then they don't. Because remember during same-sex marriage, how they told us they didn't want people from the mainland to come in and testify here in Hawaii because we had all these people from the mainland that didn't want Hawaii to be the test ground for same-sex marriage. You remember that?
Well, they even told me that in 1995 when I was on that governor's commission on sexual orientation and the law. I wanted experts on the mainland to testify by phone, and they refused to allow.
I know. So back then they were like, and I remember the other thing I remember is they also remember how mad they got when we did a poll, and the poll said that, what was it, 60 something, 68, 69% of the people didn't want it. Remember what they said? Oh, we can't legislate based on majority view. Do you remember that? But now at the legislature, at every issue, that's what we hear now. Oh, but people want it. People want it. So let's be clear that people will nitpick on both sides of the issue when it suits them. And it's a shame.
And the other thing that I would say as a general rule is it's really important for everybody that's listening or watching to realize the people that have been elected and are sitting in the legislature, in the House or the Senate, in the governor's office, in the mayor's office, everybody that gets voted for, not one of them are necessarily smarter than anybody else.
Right.
And so we don't need to revere them like they're God. What we need to do is hold them accountable. We need to make sure that they know us with aloha, but that they know us, that they know our face, they know our name, they know we live in their district. How do they find that out? We have to tell them because they're not going to walk around looking. Even when they knock on doors at election time, once the election's over, they couldn't care less about any of that stuff. We need to realize that we have the power constitutionally to potentially make them honor our desires with legislation because every single person in the state of Hawaii has exactly the same political power, one vote.
Yeah, and I think that would be the case even if there were 1.2, and there are 1.2 million people in the state of Hawaii. If 1.999999999% of the people in Hawaii wanted something, and just that one person didn't, that one person will still have a right to raise their voice at the legislature. So it doesn't matter who's winning or who's losing. The point is that, as you say, we own the government. We own the government. They are our employees. They work for us, right? So you're going to have somebody sitting across the table from you from your district who is not going to agree with you. Both of you have a place at the table, and both of you should be able to raise your voice. And I think what has happened is people of faith have, the majority of them have lost their desire to participate in the legislative process because they feel like it's a no-win situation, and they're probably right. You talked about it in the show last week, right? That things don't always go the way that we want them to go, but that doesn't mean that we stop trying. I think that we have a duty, to fight for those things. And as long as you and I have been doing this, Jim, even I get tired. I get so tired. And the reason I wanted to do the show today is because I got so much feedback this year, because now they're wanting to, so going back into time, 14 and 15-year-olds were already allowed to access medical care without parental consent. And that happened several years ago. And we tried to tell people back then that even though it was focused on homeless kids and kids that are in bad situations where their parents are abusive or neglectful or whatever, sooner or later, they're going to start carving out things, right? Whether they're going to codify abortion for 14 and 15-year-olds. And this year, talking about, having access to gender affirmation care, right? That kind of stuff. So we tell everybody it's so much harder to stop an expansion bill, right? When the major part of the bill is already law. Abortion is already law of the land. So if they're going to carve out another little niche for it, it's so hard to fight it. I'm not saying don't fight. I just want people to go into the legislature understanding that it's better to stop a bad bill before it becomes law than it is to keep fighting at the chippeways.
Well, and there's kind of a context issue, which is how does somebody know that a particular bill is a new law or an expansion of an existing law? And that's when you look at the bill, it will tell you,
Yeah.
This is to enact a new chapter in the HRS, and it'll have a blank space because the reviser of statutes after the bill passes will give it a new statute number in the books based on what, wherever it fits or whatever. And all the text will be underlined because it's all new.
Right.
If it's an expansion bill, the bill will tell you we are amending an existing law, and then they have all these words. Some words are just words on the page, some words are underlined, and some words are in brackets. And what you need to know is the words that are just on the page are not being changed. They're already in that law, but they're put in the bill so that you can see the context of the new language, because they want to show you in the bracketed language what's coming out if this bill passes, and the underlined language is what's going in if it passes. So the bill that you asked me to look at today, which is the expansion of SB1 from last year, it's very interesting. The new language, some of it, talks about the fact that since the old law said that the legal capacity of a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old was sufficient for these reproductive health services, the new language says if the parents don't consent because they don't have to be asked, the parents aren't responsible for the bill.
Right, the minor child is. Yes.
And the other thing that they took away, in every other context, if a car lot sells a minor a car, the kid doesn't have to pay for it because he's not old enough to enter into the contract. So they can repossess the car eventually if it's not wrecked the first day.
Right.
But if you don't have capacity to contract, it can't be enforced against you. But the other thing that they're doing here is saying the parents aren't required to pay. And when the kid turns 18 and becomes an adult, they can't change their mind on you, which is another thing that can happen, as we saw in the youth sex abuse stuff. when they passed the law to open the window to sue over past sex abuse stuff, the reason they had to open the window is if a young person was sexually abused and they turned 18 and they didn't bring their lawsuit within the statute of limitations that was in effect at the time, they lost the claim. What this bill says is if you're going to be under 18, from 14 to 18, and you don't get your parents to consent and they don't have to pay, when you turn 18, you can't sue either. They took that away.
You know what I find interesting too is, and we will link, if people are interested in the bill that Jim and I are talking about, we got a lot of flack in the office because we weren't doing a major call to action, right? To get people to show up at the Capitol to stop this. And it's very, very hard to do in precedent for 14 and 15-year-olds to access medical care. Has already been happening. It's already on the books. It's very, very, very hard to go. Now, can a law be repealed? Absolutely. If the right
after
people,
you've elected new representatives.
Yes. So if there was new lineup of legislators and there was a majority, because there would have to be in a majority. That's the other thing you and I get frustrated about. Just because you have 4 legislators who agree with you, you can't do anything unless you have a majority. And you and I were talking last week. We had lunch with an ex-legislator who will remain, will protect.
A key leader, we'll say.
Key leader, yes. And we talked about how wonderful we used to participate in the legislative process because there was, I don't know, people keep giving the actual number, and I there were like 18 or 19, I think, Republicans that were in the House at the time. So in order for a bill to stop on the floor, you need to have 26 noes. So if you have 19 Republicans and for whatever reason they all agree to that, you and I know that isn't always the case, though. Just because somebody has an R or a D after their name doesn't mean they always follow. But if they did, assuming that all 19 did, you would just need a handful of Democrats to vote no to kill a bill outright on the floor. Regardless.
Well, and think of it this way, too. When there are almost 20 Republicans that can vote against something, it's way easier for Democrats that agree with that to participate. When there's only 4, why fall on that sword? You're going to lose anyway.
Well, yeah, and it also sometimes the floor debate, going back to those old days, if somebody gets up and they give a passionate floor speech with facts, so I'm not talking about someone who's just a good orator. I'm talking about somebody who has really good facts and they present it. Sometimes they might make a difference, to someone who's sitting there. They don't know whether they're going yes or they're going no, and they're kind of waffling. But if somebody gives a really good floor speech, sometimes that's just what it takes to get them over the edge one way or the other. And so it makes a difference to have a really good, balanced legislature. And that's why we would love to see there be a little bit more of a balance in the legislature, because right now it's so heavily Democrat in both the House and the Senate that you don't get really good floor debates. I'm not talking talking points, because you know how much I hate talking points. I'm talking about really good debate, where people have done their homework and they want to have a good discussion about something. And not only that, who else benefits? The community. The community benefits if there's a good discussion, rather than people feeling like how they feel right now, which is, what difference does it make? What difference does me weighing in make? And I think that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is, you and I, we've been doing this a long time. We get it, that people get frustrated. Why can't we stop this bill? But how many times have we watched people testify on the part of the language that's already law?
So that's why I was trying to educate us as to what's really being changed. It's either in brackets or it's underlined.
Yeah.
So if it's language you didn't know the law already had in it, they're not there to argue about.
Yep. So what do we do? So in these last few minutes, let's talk about that. So what do we do? We're in a state. Let's face reality right now, right? We're in a state where if you're a person of faith or you're a strong conservative, you're not going to have chance for big wins at the Capitol. However, I think that people should take heart by watch what happens with the marijuana bill. The more and more the community raise their voice, and the more and more people are contacting their legislators, more and more legislators are voting no. Jim, do you know that for the first time in my recent recollection, 22 House members voted no on second reading for the marijuana bill? And I know I was getting a lot of calls from people who say, like, Eva, how come you didn't send out an alert? You know, the bill is up for reading. And I had to explain to them that all bills have to go through three readings. It's just a process. It's a process vote. What I was telling people, though, is most people will vote yes because it's a process vote, but that doesn't mean that that's how they feel about the issue. But I did say I have seen on some of those issues, I saw it happen on assisted suicide and I saw it happen on abortion, where people voted no, even on the second reading, because for them, they wanted their vote to be consistent, even if it was just, a vote.
So what do we do, you ask? What do we do? So what we do is we tell ourselves we need to be as serious about owning our government as we are about every other thing that we own and every other thing that we love. We saw an article in March at some point, I don't remember exactly where, that said that the liberal Christian community is way more politically active than the conservative Christian community.
Right.
So that means we need to start motivating ourselves and our like-minded family, friends, employees, workers, whatever. And what do we need to do? So maybe make appointments to meet with your senator and your House member. And it won't be as we're getting to the end of the session because they get too busy, but they'll know that you want to meet after session and before too long because they go away, they go wherever they're going to go. And if you are watching this from a neighbor island, tell them you want to meet with them when they come back home to their home island. And you go in and you talk, explain to them who you are. Why is it that you think the issues that are important to you are important to you? Share that more than arguing over a bill that's been introduced. When there's no bill that they have to defend and you're sharing with them who you are, what you believe, and why, and that you would like them to take those things into consideration with every single bill that comes up, it's a little bit better. And if you do that with both your senator and your House member and go for your city councilman and your mayor and you'll be more to them personally than somebody at a hearing testifying about what they believe and why they're opposed and all that kind of stuff. It's better to have that separate from the bill because a lot of times that is already in the law. It doesn't matter. But you can still share that in the office with them, and you can bring friends that are like-minded. You don't have to go by yourself if you think they're, I don't know, Goliath. They're not.
Right. No, I like that because recently I've seen people show up at the Capitol, and I've seen people that have built relationship with their legislators. There's a couple of legislators that it took me several years to build a relationship with. And now when I show up at hearings, they'll say hi to me outside in the hallway if they see me. They'll smile at me while I'm testifying. They probably vote against what I'm saying, but it took time to build relationship. But I've also seen people testify who have pissed off the legislature and they've destroyed relationships. So you get there to testify and you can see that body language as well. So I think what you're saying is very, very important.
Well, and I got gavelled, but I also was able afterwards to say to the chairman, I apologize for that. I wasn't trying to be out of line. I was just sharing this information and it didn't have any lasting problem. If you don't know I mean, it's kind of obvious if you get gambled, everybody knows. But if you don't know that you've offended somebody, it's hard to make amends. Um, but you can, is the point.
Yes. Well, we appreciate everybody taking their time out with us today. Please stay tuned for the next show, which I don't know what we're going to talk about at the next show, but make sure you stay plugged in. Jim, thank you for your time today. Everybody else, make sure you like this video, you share, you subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And, comment. If you have a question or you have an anecdote or whatever, then we want to hear from you. And before Jim leaves, I'm sure we'll take some time to acknowledge all of our viewers and listeners who have taken time to leave a comment. So, mahalo, everybody. We will see you all next week.
Aloha.